Muy buenas tardes a todos los miembros del público. Les queremos dejar saber que hoy esta reunión será interpretada en el español. Para poder acceder al canal de audio en español, usted tendrá que hacer clic en el botón de interpretación, que es un icono de un mundo o un globo, y entonces usted que estará en la barra de tareas en su plataforma de Zoom, al fondo de la pantalla. Después de eso va a aparecer un menú y luego usted podrá seleccionar el idioma para poder acceder la traducción en español. Gracias. Thank you.
Jessica, you want to take roll call?
Sure. Vice Mayor Reddick.
Here.
Councilmember Jimenez.
Here.
The subcommittee has a quorum.
And I see Councilmember Penrose in the audience, and she has her hand raised. It could be a point of order. So if it is a point of order,
it's okay. We texted. She's okay.
Okay. Got it. Well, last time we met, I think it was 2 or 3 months ago, the two of you determined that Councilmember Jimenez would be the chair. If that's your agreement going forward, it's up to you guys, but I'll assume Councilmember Jimenez, you're the chair, and you can kick us off when you're ready.
Oh, should we go again? Okay, let's do it. Well, welcome to Public Safety Subcommittee. Again, we want to address, our community about what has been going on in our community in relations to our public safety, what the city is working on, our collaboration with our law enforcement department, our sheriff's department, in about a study that it has been done in about what we have in order. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we'll go ahead and kick off. It's going to be Matthew and I kind of tag teaming tonight for the most part. So the first item is item B, a review of the fiscal year 2021-22 public safety work plan. And let me just make a couple housekeeping comments as well. Last meeting, I guess some protocols were put in place. First of all, it was our first attempt at having a live meeting. It seemed at that point in time that we generally were heading in a direction that we could start trying live meetings. And I think I even mentioned at the meeting that our overall plan for the city was to start with the subcommittees. And then we were thinking about having the Planning Commission and the Parks and Rec Commission go back to in-person, and then eventually the council. As everyone knows, things have changed since then. And with regard to the pandemic, we've slid backwards. And so not that any formal decision was made, but I think just applying common sense, we have gone backwards a tad. And so until further notice, we're not promoting moving meetings back to in-person. So that was kind of a one-off, I would say, for now. And more to come on that as we follow, various laws that might apply to us coming down from the state with regard to how meetings are conducted. So certainly happy to take input from the subcommittee on that. But for now, until further notice, we're still doing virtual. That was a try. Also at that meeting, we received direction from both the members to make sure we got plenty of notice for these meetings. And so this meeting was noticed 1 week in advance, and we promoted it as best we could. And we also received direction that we should maybe consider some kind of a regular cadence. You weren't specific, maybe every 2 or 3 months. And so we'll keep to that. If you want to give us direction at the end of the meeting, that would be fine and appreciated. But my thought would be probably have one more subcommittee before the end of the calendar year. That would be about 3 months from now. So those are the housekeeping items. And then the other comment is there are members in the audience. There's no requirement on subcommittee meetings to have a separate public forum. But at the last meeting, and again, it was in person, so maybe it was a little easier to have it be less formal. You allowed public comment on every item, and you kind of allowed it, sporadically, which seemed to work fine. So if that's the approach tonight, that would work just fine. Just let us know at what points you want to shift to public comment. Any questions then on the just protocols and that kind of stuff?
No questions from me. And I think it would be good to address, to have public comments after every topic. So that would be able to answer some of the questions or have any questions from the public.
That sounds good. Am I sharing my screen? I can't tell.
Not yet.
How's that?
There it is.
So we'll start with going through the work plan. The work plan is now a composite of 8 deliverables. It was 10 recommendations. And as you'll recall, those went before your body first, and then they went to the council, and the council deleted 2 because they were kind of moot and we had already accomplished them, or we had already moved past them. And then pretty substantial editing was done to the other 8. We incorporated all the editing that the council blessed that night. That was then approved by resolution. And those 8 deliverables are on our website. And our plan today was to just go through them one by one and give a status report and take questions on progress we've made in the first couple months. I'm going to take 4 of them. Matthew's going to take 4 of them. And as you said, Mr. Chair, you can take your public comments after I get through after we get through all 8 of them. So the first 2, Matthew, you're going to take the first 2. Is that correct?
Correct. Thank you, Bob. And thank you, council members. Glad to be here with you and provide updates on all this important work that we've been working on. The first item the first deliverable is to continue implementation of the Llanera Serrano Presente program. For those that aren't aware, this is a program developed by our local Latino Advisory Council that was given to the city back last summer and adopted by the council in May of this year. The purpose of the program really, and Councilmember Jimenez was involved in the drafting of this, and he could provide some additional context if needed. But I believe the main purpose was to reduce the fear that some members of our community have around law enforcement by building better connections with law enforcement, providing an opportunity for people to provide feedback in a safe and anonymous manner if that's what they choose, and to commit additional funding towards mental health services. And you'll see here, in line with that, there were 3 main things that we moved forward with as deliverables. The first is the Meet Your Deputies program. And again, the idea for this is to connect members of our community with our sheriff's deputies and those that serve and patrol here on the coast, and really get to know them, understand them as people, and see them as people, and learn about why they chose to serve and how they want to impact the community positively, and then vice versa, to help our deputies meet members of our community in a much more casual, friendly environment where they can build positive relationships, so that when we reach those stressful interactions, that there's a relationship built and both sides feel humanized in each other's eyes. So our initial attempt at this was held back on June 9th. It was a virtual meeting. We were just kind of feeling like we were coming out of the pandemic a little bit at that point, but not quite ready to go in person. So we held it virtually over Zoom. It was sporadically attended. I think there was about a dozen people that attended, as well as Captain Lopez and 2 of his deputies. It was a great meeting. There was lots of Q&A. We got to hear about these deputies and their backgrounds and why they chose to serve. And then they answered some great and some tough questions from our community. After that meeting and kind of talking about how that meeting went, we realized that though there was some positive that came from it, it didn't really meet the needs and the intents of this program. And we realized that doing this virtually and kind of in a formal setting just really didn't work. And so, gratefully, all credit due to Councilmember Jimenez working really closely with Captain Lopez. They really put their heads together and thought about the community we're trying to reach and how to reach them. And on August 20th, they held the second event that was informally called Tacos with Cops. And it was held at the Main Street Park Apartments. There was tacos, there was food, there was games. And it really, I think, broke down barriers, very well attended, broke down barriers with the community, allowed our deputies and members of the Sheriff's Department to really just sit down and have a really more personal connection with members of the community. And the response was great. And I expect that that is the format that will continue going forward. Our plan is to do at least one more by the end of this calendar year. And then going into next year, we'll revisit it and make sure that this is the format that we want to continue and figure out how often we want to do that. Before I move forward, I'd love to hear if Councilmember Jimenez has any feedback on that as well.
Yes, of course. It was a well-attended event. I think we had between 40 and 50, including children, from the community of South Main. And that it was a something I really enjoy, watching. There was, the two of the deputies were playing with the children around the park before we did the presentation, before we ate. It's something that we actually with vision to do. It was when we talked about doing meeting the deputies, this is what we were talking about. More of a impersonal presentation, conversations, getting to know the community, deputies, addressing the community with any questions for them, and just interaction. The interaction, and I saw, I think the youngest attendee was probably maybe 3 years old, maybe. So, and that's what we want to see. We had kids as young as 3, and maybe as old, maybe the oldest, attendee was probably around 70. So that expand, it's building a relationship. That's what we've been talking about. When Janine Serrano presented program, talked about this, it was about building a relationship, over law enforcement with the community. And if we are able to do this again, something in person, we are already thinking about the location to do it. Parks are always a good place to meet, makes everybody comfortable, and, just addressing in the interaction. So I want to, see this happen again. Hopefully, like you mentioned, before the end of the year, hopefully, COVID will not affect this, because we need to do more of this interaction.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Jimenez. Completely agree. And so if you're already starting to put thoughts into the next one and the location, we don't want all the burden to be on you. So let us know how we can help with the logistics. That's what we're here for. October, November, could be nice weather in October. I agree, a park setting's the way to go. So let Matthew and I carry the load and help put that event on.
Great, thank you. I appreciate the input on that as well. Much better articulated than I could have. The next item, the next deliverable under this work plan was a resource line. And the purpose of this was really an opportunity for members of our community to provide feedback, positive and negative, about their interactions or interactions they observed with law enforcement in a way that they could do it anonymously, have a kind of a third party between them and law enforcement, and really feel safe and comfortable providing that feedback. And so on July 1st, we launched our law enforcement feedback line. It's a two-piece. We have a phone number that you can call with a recorded in English and Spanish options to provide this information. We also have a web form in English and Spanish on our website, and several city staff that are able to respond to those messages in a timely manner, and then provide this information to the sheriff. We're learning a lot since launching this July 1st. Part of this is reporting back to the community. And what we've learned, we knew going into this that the anonymity of people making reports would be protected from like a PRA or another agency seeking this information. But what we have learned through our city attorney's office is there's penal code language that actually really limits the amount of information we can share publicly about these complaints and feedback that we receive. And it's tied to the personnel records of the deputies involved. And so if you go to our law enforcement feedback webpage, which is hmbcity.com/law enforcement feedback, we are publishing a weekly, every Monday, a cumulative report of the feedback we've received. And the information we can provide really is the timing of when we received it, the type of feedback we received, and a confirmation that it's been provided to law enforcement. We can't provide any information about any actions taken. It's really limited. So we still think there's value in collecting this information and staff working with the sheriff's office. And we believe over time, being able to look in a little more detail from staff perspective, we can identify trends of issues or things that we want to change or improve upon. But from a public standpoint, they're not going to be able to access as much information as they had hoped. The other thing we found to date, we've only received 5 pieces of feedback in 2 months. And we haven't received any in the last month. And so we've reached out to our partners and gathered some feedback, and we've got a plan for how we believe it requires a little bit more grassroots effort to get the word out. We've used our normal city channels, and based on the complaints that we've received, it's very much in line with the people that respond often to other city feedback and outreach. And so we're going to be working closely with our partners. Another great idea we got from Councilmember Jimenez is we're printing business cards that have more than just this. They're called public safety resource cards, and they have in English and Spanish a variety of phone numbers that people can call, whether it's an emergency, a non-emergency, they need to reach the fire district, they're having a mental health crisis or a suicide crisis. There's a variety of phone numbers they can call. And then the bottom half is dedicated to directing people to this phone number and this web form so people can go in and submit feedback. This will allow our community partners to provide these directly to people. If they hear from them that there's a concern, they can hand them out at community events, food distributions. We'll make sure that we've got them available at all the nonprofits, at our facilities. And then we're also working on a flyer with some information about anonymity and how this information will be used. And that'll also be something that can be handed out and hopefully work through our partners at a grassroots level to really get the word out and make sure the community members that we're really trying to target, which are those that wouldn't go through normal channels to provide feedback like this, are aware of it, know how to use it, and have the confidence that it's something that can help them, and they'll remain anonymous and safe by using it. So more to come on that, something we'll continue to invest time and energy into. We want it to be successful, and we want it to glean the kind of data that will help us make better decisions and work better with the sheriff's office in the future. The third item under this deliverable is city commitment to mental health services. And under that commitment, the council budgeted $75,000 in this current budget to help support that. And there's really 2 areas we've targeted to use this funding and any other future funding that might come available. The first I'll talk about on the next slide, or on a future slide, which is our community responder pilot program that we're developing to provide an alternative response to mental health crises here on the coast. And then the second came from some of our focus groups and discussions about mental health with our community partners. And it's looking at ways to implement mental health first aid training. Some people might be aware of the ALGE program. And it truly is, it's first aid training for people that are interacting with somebody having a crisis to help bridge, like regular first aid, bridge the time between that interaction and a trained professional intervening. And many of our nonprofits have expressed a desire to have their staff trained. City staff should be trained in this. So those are the two areas we're targeting, and we're making good progress, and we'll provide updates later on in this evening and in future meetings as we take further action. Next slide, please, Bob. The next item is somewhat tied to the previous item, and that is community policing, and it's more broad. It's just promoting events and opportunities for deputies to meet community members and business operators where they live and work. And obviously the Meet the Deputies program is a really key component of this. We've already had the two, and we'll do another one here before the end of the year, and it's something we'll want to continue in the future. Additionally, on August 3rd, many people participated in the annual National Night Out program. Again, for those who aren't aware, this is an annual nationwide program. It's typically the first Tuesday in August of each year, where community members are encouraged to hold block parties and gather members of neighborhoods together. And then they enjoy visits from mostly law enforcement and first responders, but often city staff and other agencies. And again, it's just an opportunity to meet the community where they are in a really casual and positive setting and build positive connections. The Sheriff's Office has always been very supportive of this program. Our City Council has always been very supportive of this program. In typical years, we provide $100 gift cards to registered parties. We provide support for closing streets. We usually provide some goodies to provide handouts and information. And this year we were able to provide emergency backpacks to organizers so that they'd have something for their 72-hour kits. And it was canceled last year, but it went on this year. The timing was good because people were feeling pretty good about COVID at that time. We were a little bit smaller. We had 17 neighborhood parties and a huge outpouring of support from the Sheriff's Office, who were able to make it to a lot of these events and connect with the community in a really positive way. Another thing that we need to explore that we've heard recommendations for is these walks with the deputies and with our captain, where when time allows, our law enforcement staff go for walks with community leaders in different parts of our community, meet with business leaders, business operators, neighborhood groups, and again, meet them where they are. And we feel like this is a really low cost and easy way to make those connections. I know that Councilmember Jimenez and Chief Lopez have done one of these walks, and it was really positive. And we want to provide more opportunities for that with all of our council members and in all parts of our community. We were looking forward to some other community events like the Pumpkin Festival and the Summer's End Music Festival and some of the other, smaller events that were planned to connect the deputies to the community. As we know, those couldn't go forward this year at this time, but we're hoping that as we get into late fall and winter, some of these events will move forward. The Night of Lights, the La Posada, and other activities will give those opportunities to bring the community and law enforcement together. And as we go into our planning for next calendar year, that will always be a focus of any planning that we do for events, is how do we incorporate law enforcement in a positive way to connect with the community.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm going to take the next two items. So this is the final wording that was agreed upon at the council meeting a couple months ago. Conduct a culturally competent survey to ascertain how the community feels about public safety in Half Moon Bay. Pay particular attention to the mitigation of and correction of bias and ensuring that underrepresented voices are proportionally included. So we have just started on this task, I would say. We have reached out in a variety of ways to talk to other cities and, through our networks to look to see others that have done this. We have also reached out to some firms that we know do this kind of work and do other type of polling work. And then we have also just very preliminarily started to kind of put a request for proposal together that we would send out. So we've started, but we really have to, the key step is to get an RFP out and then pick a firm and then move from there. So I think just scratching the surfaces, kind of pre-RFP, we have a pretty good sense of 5 or 6 firms in the Bay Area. There's not a lot that are the kind of firms that could do this. And so I assume all, or at least a good portion of them will submit when we put the RFP out. And our intention would be to make sure that the Public Safety Subcommittee is comfortable with the firm we pick. I think a lot of attention went to how this deliverable was worded, because there wasn't necessarily complete agreement about the purpose of the survey or how the methodology of the survey should work. So we want to be really careful and get it right, and we want to get the right firm. We want to design the survey correctly. And so to do that, we want to be completely transparent with the subcommittee and the community and take you along every step of the way. Our intention was to do this by the end of the calendar year. That could slip. I think it's more important that we get it right. And so that's where we're at. We'll certainly take feedback from the committee on this at the end when we get through all these, and if the community has any comments. But we have started, and as I said, the key next milestone is to do the work we need to do to hire a firm, the right firm, to do this work for us. Oops. Wow, it really went ahead. The next item is interesting. Once fully implemented, request statistical data that will be tracked in compliance with AB 953 from the county. I think not everyone had a complete understanding of AB 953, but the limited understanding that we had and we tried to present to the committee and the council and the community was that there was certainly no conflict here on doing this. People kind of shrug their shoulders, but there's a lot more here than meets the eye, I think, in what this law requires. And so there's a lot here, and it'll be interesting as this is rolled out. So I think it's great that it was included. And the one note I have on this is a long-term deliverable, I would say. The one, I guess, timely note is that just recently, the grand jury, the San Mateo County grand jury, came out with a report related to RIPA. RIPA is the acronym. It's the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, RIPA. So you'll be hearing that acronym, I think, more often in the next couple of years. So this report came out July 27th. The report was delivered to San Mateo County. It was also delivered to all cities and all law enforcement agencies that do work in the county and that are law enforcement agencies that this new law, RIPA, will apply to. And so, as you know, with grand jury reports, we are required by law to respond to the report. And the council has to sign off on that response. We have 90 days to respond. And like I said, since we received it July 27th, we're starting to run out of time. It's our intention that this will go before your city council on October 5th. So not next meeting, but the meeting after. And so you'll see the report then would be presented publicly. And I asked, the report's about 45 pages. It's pretty interesting. We're going to put it up on our website so the public can see it, but it will be presented to the council on October 5th. With a draft letter that we are required to send to the grand jury showing our response. I'm just going to read a couple passages from it that I think are interesting. I'm just reading, you know, what the issue is and why did the grand jury decide to look at this. California enacted the Racial and Identity Profiling Act in 2015, so it's actually been 6 years, to highlight one of the more serious problems that can obstruct effective and fair law enforcement: implicit bias and racial and identity profiling. By requiring, quote unquote, stop data, and by that they mean collecting certain information at a stop, be documented and reported, law enforcement agencies will gain a tool to improve racial and identity awareness in law enforcement. And so the question that the grand jury of San Mateo County posed is, are the San Mateo County law enforcement agencies, are they ready to collect and report the RIPA stop data? Will the LEAs use the data to build trust within the community and improve their department? So very, very right on cue with the conversations that we've been having here in Half Moon Bay. So again, I think it's an interesting report. The deadline, well, the start line, I should say, not the deadline, the start line. All county law enforcement agencies are required to start collecting this data on January 1st, 2022. So that's right around the corner. And they have to submit that data to the California Department of Justice by April 1st, 2023. So they do have a fair amount of time to get up to speed and start submitting the data. The data collection focuses on implicit bias by capturing the officer's initial perception of the person's race, sex, gender identity, sexual preference, age, physical or mental handicap, and English fluency. So this is what's coming. And again, we anticipated it by including it as part of our work plan. Just going to the end and the recommendations. So the majority of the recommendations of this grand jury report will not apply to Half Moon Bay. And the reason they won't is because we contract with the sheriff. So the sheriff is the law enforcement agency, and the sheriff will be responding to several findings and recommendations contained in here. We are being asked to respond to all the recommendations, but again, the majority of our answers, as you'll see on October 5th, are going to be similar in that they refer to the fact that we contract with the sheriff. But the last recommendation says in the second quarter of 2022, each of the contracting entities, so this one specifically, this recommendation specifically is to Half Moon Bay, should begin requesting RIPA stop data for its jurisdiction separate from the rest of the sheriff's stop data. So it contemplated what we contemplated too, which is the sheriff's going to collect this at a county level, and to what extent they will be able to subdivide it among cities like us is yet to be seen. But this report basically alleges that they should, and we agree, and that's why we included this, that we should be able to request the data from the county specifically for Half Moon Bay, because that's the whole point of it. So I thought that was really interesting. That's all I have on this item, but yeah, we were right on time, and the grand jury obviously was on this as well, and so a lot more to come on RIPA, I think. Did I skip one again, Matthew? No. Back to Matthew.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, the next item, the next two items are related to mental health and funding, and they're somewhat tied together. So I'm actually going to share the recommendations or the deliverables, and then I'll kind of give the updates. The first deliverable here is to monitor the mental health response pilot program being delivered by the 4 large cities in San Mateo County with the county, and determine whether Half Moon Bay should consider a similar program. That program was announced in January of this year. It's the CWCRT, the Community Wellness and Crisis Response Team. And it's a collaboration between the Behavioral Health and Recovery Services Division of County Health and the 4 largest cities that have police departments here in San Mateo County: Daly City, Redwood City, San Mateo, and South San Francisco. And the idea is to designate some very specially trained officers in those police departments and pair them up with a specially trained mental health practitioner that would respond with them to certain types of calls and work together to hopefully improve outcomes for especially mental health related responses. There's not a lot to update here. This program has faced some challenges in its development and has been a little slow to move forward. I would say the two big developments are a few months ago, the county entered into a contract with Star Vista, which is a large mental health service provider here in San Mateo County, to actually provide the practitioners. Originally, I think they had hoped to use county staff, and I think they realized working through a nonprofit was a better approach. And Star Vista is actively, as of today, recruiting for people to work in those roles. So no idea when it actually kicks off. I think they've got to get these people hired and onboarded and trained before we'll see this actually out in the field and happening live and give us some data and some anecdotal data, if anything, to respond to. But we'll keep watching it. I know the county is very committed to this. The cities, I believe, are very committed to this, and it'll be interesting to see how this type of alternative response program works. This is kind of a hybrid response program where it's armed law enforcement with a specially trained mental health practitioner. The second part of this deliverable is for us to work with the county, our local service providers, and identify additional resources with mental health expertise to plan a mental health crisis response pilot program and include broad outreach and engagement with all partners, stakeholders, and members of the public to ensure the pilot program is successful. So what we're calling this is our community responder program, pilot program. We've put a lot of energy into this, lots of exciting things happening here, held additional meetings with our community liaisons and different service providers. Right now we're gathering interest in how these different nonprofits here on the coast can support and participate in this. At this point, based on the feedback we've received from those nonprofits and working with our partners, we really believe this will model the CAHOOTS program, which we received a presentation on back in July, where we'll have standalone teams that will include a mental health or social work specialist paired with a medically trained specialist, a EMT or a paramedic or a nurse. And they, as a pair, would receive some really specialized training around crisis intervention and de-escalation, conflict resolution. And then they would ideally respond to dispatch through the 911 system and respond to certain types of calls in the city, likely related to mental health, suicide concerns, nonviolent family disputes, neighbor disputes, homeless issues, drug and alcohol abuse and intoxication issues, and ideally provide a different approach to dealing with those concerns, getting those folks connected to the services they need to overcome these challenges, and limit the need for armed law enforcement response to those, which then also frees up our sheriff's deputies to deal with the other things that they have to deal with in our community and are spread very thin to do. I believe the way we're going to approach this is we will contract with a local nonprofit as a lead agency, and they will do the hiring and any subcontracting with our other nonprofits to get the right staff in place, procure a vehicle, and any other resources we need to move this forward. We've met several times with the Director of Public Safety Communications, that's the 911 dispatch department at the county. They are supportive of what we're doing and eager to support, to work with us. But there are a lot of challenges to incorporating a new approach within the dispatch system. And so we'll be working really closely with them as we design this. And ideally, the design would allow for 911 calls to be dispatched, certain types of 911 calls to be dispatched for this purpose. The alternative is to create a separate phone line and do a lot of public education and outreach to make sure people know that there's another number they can call. Tied to this, of course, is funding. And we have some dedicated funding, as I mentioned earlier. We've got some soft commitments for support from some other agencies, but we are really going to need to identify some significant funding support to pilot this. And I'll share a little bit about the work we're doing around that. The two main things we're doing right now are watching two assembly bills that are active at the state level. The first is AB 988. So a little bit of background, 911 as the emergency phone number that's a national law, that 911 is reserved and set up for emergency call and response. In October of last year, Donald Trump actually signed a bill that made 988 nationally the official crisis line. So across the country, there's work being done to establish 988 as a crisis mental health support system. And in the state of California, AB 988 is trying to set up support within the Department of Health and Human Services for rolling out and implementing some really great action related to this. It would start with just establishing call centers. And recently, the state set aside $20 million to support the 13 suicide hotline centers in the state of California that exist now to start taking those calls. So we will likely see 988 advertising and marketing rolled out in the coming months so that people know that if they're having a mental health crisis, a suicide crisis, they can just call 988 and they'll reach their local hotline that's already in existence. Star Vista, that I mentioned before, operates that hotline here in San Mateo County. And this would be a great step forward. The next step forward is the legislation would require counties to set up specialized call centers beyond those nonprofit kind of suicide hotlines and really create a robust, infrastructure around this. And then eventually require them to implement community responder programs like I've described earlier, where if someone calls 988 and they get through to somebody and they get the dispatch made, it will never go through the 911 system. They'll dispatch these special teams directly from 988. That's a very long horizon. It's probably 6 or 7 years before any of that's fully implemented if AB 988 passes. But we're hopeful. That's where I think we need to get as a state, where this is not the city of Half Moon Bay or the coast side trying to piece this together, that there's a system in place and funding in place available to provide this across the state, and this becomes normal and expected in our communities. In the meantime, AB 118 is a really important bill that we're watching right now. And Senator Becker, who's our local senator, is one of the co-authors, and we'll be connecting with his office to understand a little bit more about the text of this and how we might fit into this. But the purpose of this is to set up within the State Department of Health and Human Services funding opportunities for pilot programs like we're preparing for right now. And at best, the funding will be available January 1st of 2023. It'll be at least $250,000 per year for 3 or 4 years under the pilot phase. And our goal is to be well positioned for that funding. Not sure if we're eligible based on the text of the bill. We'll find out more from Senator Becker's office. If we're not eligible, we'll likely have to partner with the county Department of Public, or the health department as a partner to draw down that funding. But my conversations with them is they are eager to partner with us to help and support this pilot program. So I think that wouldn't be an issue. So those are two things we're watching, but that doesn't bring funding to us for several years, and it doesn't bring that larger infrastructure probably for a decade. So I think what we're planning to pilot is a bridge to larger implementation. It can serve as a model for other communities in the county. I've already been contacted by another city in the county with interest in learning what we're doing, because they may want to replicate that in their city. And then in the meantime, we've got to find additional funding, I believe, to make this successful. So I recently attended a webinar with the Obama Foundation geared towards funding for, different services like this and other police reforms. I made some good contacts there that I've got some feelers out to see if there might be some nationwide funding grants that we can pursue. The Department of Health and Child Services for the state has a grant right now called the Crisis Care Mobile Units Program. And it's for this type of a program, but it is focused on programs that serve people under the age of 25. It's really geared towards youth and young adults. San Mateo County has applied for these funds. We've already had conversations with them about potentially partnering if they receive the funds and move forward with this, and they might be able to supplement some of the work that we're doing. And then, philanthropy is a place we're going to have to look. I met with a representative from the Chan Zuckerberg Institute a few months ago through our Farm Worker Affairs Coalition here on the coast. They were pushing their community fund, which as a city we're not eligible for, and the types of projects and focus areas they were focused on, this isn't really a fit. But through that contact, I've reached out and I'm hoping that they might have some interest. They're interested in supporting programs on the coast, protecting marginalized communities. And I think this is the kind of program that might really fit their needs, and they might be a great funder or get us connected to somebody that might be able to provide funding. So all that is to say that I think we're starting to see a lot of clarity on how we are going to move this forward. We're hearing interest from our nonprofit partners to participate. And so for me, the next step is to identify who that lead nonprofit agency is that we'll partner with. And then we'll work with them and a smaller group of our other community partners to really hone in on the design of this. The Cahoots program that came to our meeting in July, we've been in contact with them. They're very interested in helping us get this stood up, and I think can be a great resource, at least for training and some of the best practices that they use. And so we're really confident that as this comes forward, we'll be able to do something successful here. So really, as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about this, and I think this can make really positive impacts on our community. And we're really grateful for the partnership of all the nonprofits in our community who want to see it successful and rolled out here as soon as possible.
Thanks, Matthew. These last two, I promise we'll go fast, and so we can turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, and so you can react and then get comments from the community, because we have not made as much progress on these last two, I would say, as the work Matthew's done on the previous one. So this one, pursue the creation of a regular working group of the San Mateo County cities who contract with the sheriff for police services to discuss shared interests. This one, it's not for lack of trying. I'm just not getting vibes that the key cities, a couple key cities are interested in doing this, at least maybe at this time. Maybe it's a timing thing and we got to be patient and hit this when the timing's right. I think I've mentioned before at a council meeting that Portola Valley is interested. They would at least be willing to do a one-time meeting where a couple of their council members got together with a couple of our council members and had this kind of conversation. I think Woodside probably would too. But San Carlos, it has not shown any interest whatsoever. And Millbrae, I have my doubts about. I do have a meeting scheduled with the city manager of Millbrae coming up. And so we'll discuss this idea and see, but I have my doubts. So we can certainly take comments on this and see if you have any redirect on this one. But maybe this is one we just have to be patient and the value of it, we just don't know. But I think there is always the value of meeting with our colleagues and sharing information. That much I know. So we'll keep it on the list and see where it goes. And then finally, not for lack of work on this one, but this one really is subject of the last item on your agenda today. So this one, work with the sheriff to identify positive modifications in the three areas: community policing, training, and mental health. that will be incorporated into the sheriff contract when it is extended in June 2022. So this we talked about at the last council meeting. This also was one of those ones that the council wanted to get the wording just right. So this is how the final version read. We have until June 2022 to negotiate any changes and in those areas and any areas for that matter. But as I said, this item is the third item on your agenda today, so we can get more into it in a few minutes. As you know, and as I'll remind you, when we get to that item, we do have a deadline coming September 30th, where we have to send a written communication to the sheriff on whether or not we want to exercise the third option on this contract. So with that, I'll turn it back to you at this point, and you guys can any questions we'll take, any comments, and if you want to take some, since we've gone quite a bit, if you want to take some community comments at this time, that would be fine. I know we took a lot of time with that. I'll just mention now the second item on the agenda, the fiscal year 2021 annual report. We're recommending that be tabled. Sal Lopez was not able to make it tonight, and in fact, he's going to be out for a couple of weeks. So we will save a little time for you tonight. That item we're asking to be tabled, and probably what we'll do is just take that straight to the council in October. So back to you, Mr. Chair, for now.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Could we have the recommendations on the screen for the public to see for any questions?
All 8 on one slide.
Yeah, do we have them or not?
I don't have them.
I can pull them up.
Oh,
from,
the Word document. Yeah,
yeah.
why don't you pull that up? That's a good idea. We'll put that up. Thank you. Matthew's doing that now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We do have them on a one-page Word doc.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Red, do you have any questions?
I do. I'd like to hear from the public first.
Okay. Thank you. I would
And
like to do the
is my
same thing.
screen share showing Exhibit A here?
You got to go to the second page though and go to a full screen.
Yeah, it's just showing the top of the resolution, Matthew.
Oh, gosh. Oh, because I moved it. Okay, hold on. How about?
You know, I have the one-page Word doc. Oh, there you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
Perfect.
sorry about that.
Here, you got it. There you
I
go.
moved it to a different monitor and that threw it into a tizzy. So, all right.
Excellent.
Okay, we're ready for public comment.
Yes, please.
Okay, our first speaker is David Ablovi. David, go ahead. I'll start the timer.
Cool. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I'm going to kind of consolidate my comments here instead of going to each item. So Vice Mayor Reddick, thank you for inviting us to speak. You've said recently that attempts by Council members Rarbeck and Jimenez to reform our local policing were, in your words, virtue signaling. The problem with your use of those words is that signaling or showing one's good virtue, or in the case of a city, one's desire and intent to provide for the safety of its citizens, should not be a bad thing at all. Quite the opposite. Taking important steps to redress the imbalance of equity in policing and signaling to your constituents that this is what you're going to do is in fact virtue signaling of the finest kind. Or it is until your work is derailed by a combination of laziness, a failure of imagination, and a callous disregard for the people whom you ostensibly serve. Which brings us full circle to this meeting, which is itself a cynical display of virtue signaling of the worst kind. Tonight, staff is going to put on a dog and pony show showing how great things are here in HMB and how hard everybody has been working to do what exactly. They will tell you the sheriff has been doing a great job listing item after item that shows this to be the case, while leaving out issues like the fact that the sheriff is refusing to give you documentation that could help in HMB's defense in the Harmon civil trial, despite being legally obligated to do so. A few minutes ago, Matthew told you honestly about this great new hotline. It does absolutely nothing because it is a hotline that goes into a cynical vacuum from which no accountability can escape. There will be no reports back from the sheriff in response to complaints because that information is protected. There will be no possibility of disciplinary action and no response at all to individual complaints unless the sheriff decides to give us one. A phone number that leads to a recording that leads to a black hole of non-accountability while being presented as a step towards accountability for a disaffected population is, Madam Vice Mayor, the purest and most cynical form of virtue signaling. Before you consider the renewal of the sheriff's contract, actually this isn't going to happen tonight, but Captain Lopez will spool off their great crime statistics and all their hard work without once acknowledging the backwards way those numbers represent policing. No one in their right mind would choose a doctor based on how many patients the doctor sees, just as you should not be making any decisions based on how many traffic stops or arrests the sheriff makes. From your words, I already know you don't get this, so I'll state the obvious here explicitly. The important numbers for your committee in making decisions on policing are how many people were helped in our community and how many were directly or indirectly harmed by our policing. You can't answer that question now, and you won't be able to answer it after this meeting either, despite the fact that the answer is knowable. Yet you are going to make a recommendation to the entire council on re-engaging the sheriff for another 3 years. Footnote here, the slide that the city manager just put up said the contract is going to be re-engaged no matter what, or assumes that, which is a problem. That fact is an absolute travesty. The very opposite of virtue signaling would be actually doing something that changes the daily lives of your constituents for the better, introducing imaginative and progressive action items and reachable goals to permanently and positively alter the currently inequitable relationship between police and our community is what we expect of our leaders. No, spending hours to hire yet another consultant to do a survey that no rational person thinks is necessary does not count as accomplishing something. This ineffective and impotent committee, as measured by the material accomplishments of it to date, is not representative of what your community wants from you. I am counting on you to end the virtue signaling and to instead start leading as you were elected to do. Thank you for your patience, as I'm pretty sure I ran over.
Thanks, David. Next, we have Stacy McCarthy. Stacy, go ahead.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Joaquin, Vice Mayor Ruddick. I will just direct my thoughts toward the quote unquote resource line as it was implemented. We don't have visibility. I think one of the many things that we were hoping for from this line was an opportunity to establish, some might say reestablish trust with our how our Sheriff's Department is responding to the needs of our community. Health and well-being being the primary role, we believe the Public Safety Subcommittee here, and that the fact that there are some legal barriers that prohibit visibility to even the low level input that's been received is a huge disappointment. It makes it feel completely ineffective. And I think we should do everything we can in the rewriting of the contract, if you so choose to move forward with the Sheriff's Department, to look at the visibility that they refuse to grant us. It's been 6 years since the RIPA Act has been implemented. Our neighboring city of San Mateo County has been San Mateo, the city of, has been complying for a number of years and has great visibility online. There's no reason why we shouldn't expect the same level of service from our Sheriff's Department that we contract with. So I highly encourage us to take a look at visibility and transparency as you contemplate re-engaging with the Sheriff's Department going forward, as well as I encourage you looking at a shorter term for that engagement, since there is an important election coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Our next speaker is Maureen Fleming. Maureen, go ahead.
Yes, good evening to the council members and my neighbors. I really wasn't quite sure on whether I should speak now or if I should speak after agenda item D about renewing the contract, but I would like to express my thoughts, so let me proceed. I've spoken before on this topic of police dismantling, backdoor defunding and demoralizing of the San Mateo Sheriff's Office. I am opposed to your dangerous and radical plan of installing your own police chief, to your plan of not enforcing statewide enacted laws, and to your plan of disarming our sheriffs. We are a growing community and we need more law enforcement, not less. Every day I am reading shocking news about our growing community. For instance, we've had a woman pushed off the coastal bluffs and her bike thrown on top of her. We have had a woman in Miramar walking a dog and the perpetrator then proceeded to smash her car window and steal her cell phone. We have had a shootout or some type of shooting above Frenchman's Creek at a marijuana growing field. This issue with marijuana is going to get bigger, not smaller. We have had a 13-year-old girl at the Half Moon Bay High School victimized by a sexual pervert. Just this past week, I am reading about a criminal enterprise which airdropped 116 pounds of methamphetamine into a field in San Diego. More people in this state will be killed by methamphetamine than at the hands of law enforcement. The community wants law enforcement. They want laws that were legislatively enacted to be enforced. Our Chief Lopez previously gave us statistics about tens of thousands of interactions that the police have with the community members, and only 0.0003% resulted in a 72-hour hold of a mentally disturbed individual. These statistics prove the point that the current city council is totally misguided in pursuing the Jimenez-Roebuck plan. That plan is dangerous. And I will conclude by adding that we have total exposure on the coast with our harbor and with our airfield and on our highways. Anything can come in and happen here. We need alert, professional law enforcement agency, and we, very importantly, must show the sheriffs that they are respected and greatly appreciated by our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. There are no public speakers. No more public speakers.
Vice Mayor Reddick, would you like to comment, address the public?
Well, I'd like to ask a question of staff. Have you created like a timeline for any of these sort of initiatives? I know we can't like get it down to the week, but it seems to me a timeline would facilitate action and reporting on any actions taken. I'm feeling like the process of the subcommittee is a little loosey-goosey. I think it sounds like staff has been working hard on a variety of issues, especially on the mental health thing, but I'd like to see sort of this effort, packaged with, a timeline and some commitments to get answers, to create deliverables. I would have expected more at this meeting, including an RFP, on the survey. So, I agree with the perception that things do not seem to be moving as quickly as the public might like, even though I know that there's lots of exploration going on. But I think we need to, be a little more formal about the approach, and I think more formal about when we have meetings. It just feels kind of ad hoc to me, and I don't think that that's as accountable to the public as the public has been expecting in the various meetings that we've had on public safety issues. And I know we can't have a real detailed timeline, but I think we need to, measure progress somehow and be able to communicate that. And, some would say that, well, we're hearing from a very small, vocal minority on these issues, but once we commit, publicly to pursue various initiatives, if we're going to do it at all, we need to do it, with some formality, some transparency and commitment, as opposed to we're working on it, as we get updates, we'll report back. It's got to be some more formal commitment here on staff's part on a regular basis. And I'd like to hear how Councilmember Jimenez feels about that. But that's what I'm feeling myself, and that's kind of what I'm hearing from public comments as well. That's all I have at the moment.
Thank you. There are several things I would like to address. I know, for the, in our community or public, might feel like we are moving slow. There's a lot of the things that are behind the scenes that they don't get to see. For example, one of the walks I did with Captain Lopez. I've also met with 3 other deputies here in our coast. We had conversations about our community, about engaging, our community and, with, law enforcement, building a positive relationship. So that goes on, it happens. I am reaching out, to some of the deputies. I actually invited one of the deputies to come and watch a soccer game. I introduced the deputy to several people in our community, the ones that were at the game, some of the players, some of the people watching the game, and he felt very welcome. As he walked away, he commented to me, that he felt welcome to be there. After the game, there was also a barbecue. Food is always good. So he got to eat some of the the carne asada that we had. So not many people know about this. When we first introduced the Yanira Serrano Presente program, and we talked about meeting our deputies, we really working on it. My conversation with Captain Lopez, it was not an easy task. There's 8 deputies in the coast, and we're gonna keep 8 deputies in the coast, in Half Moon Bay, to be in our community. But there's more information that we need, from Captain Lopez. There was, one of the questions that he was asked about how many calls they attended to, deputies, and how many of those calls were, mental health related. He's not here right now, but I'm planning to ask him a question, when he reports back to us, at our next meeting, is how many of those calls an armed officer was needed? It's a very different question. Bringing programs like CAHOOTS, similar to CAHOOTS, to our community, is to actually to provide support to our deputies. Where there's be places where they don't have to answer to the call. Of course, there is, something like what happened at the high school, with a young, student, something happened at the Bluffs, with the person that was thrown off the Bluffs. Of course, an armed officer is needed. But some of these calls, an armed officer might not be needed. So that's something we need to find the data from. That's something that we're moving forward to. It might seem slow, but I think we are moving at the right pace. When we first introduced the Jimenez Fairback, report, there was a comment that was made to me, that it was, with this report, it looks like we are moving back, backwards. We are not moving backwards. Actually, we are moving forward. I see it. Mr. Bloby, who commented about how we were going to talk about how great the relationship is with law enforcement, in our community. That's one of the goals, to continue to do that. But at the same time, to implement programs, that is gonna, we're gonna be able to be more visible. He talked about the hotline, accountability on the department, the sheriff's department. That's something like Matthew commented, we are working on about having this resource line, make it more available, make it more visible. That's why we have, working on having the business card, the magnet that we can put in, keep in our refrigerators, to get an easy access to the number. I personally went into the website to look for this number. It's not as simple to find it. It's not very simple to find it. So we're gonna make it accessible. With that, it will take time reaching out into the community to talk about why is this line available. What is the purpose of this line? I've talked about this line, these resource lines, with several people in the community, and we want to have access to it. So we are moving forward. We are, priority here in Half Moon Bay is to provide a safety environment, for everybody. Just to have that available, it will make a difference. And let me say that this resource line, this hotline, is to have comments, about our deputies. A good comment is always welcome. It's not about having, negative comments about the behavior of our deputies. It's about how important it is to have our deputies in the coast, because that's what we're trying to do. Some of the other things I've had, some of the meetings, I've met with, other deputies from San Mateo County, and asked them, about the work schedule, right? How many days a week do they work? How many hours a day do they work? What is their resting days between work? So with this, I'm thinking about the mental health of our deputies. I am worried about my deputies, the deputies that we have in the coast, how they're doing. Are they, they're resting? Are they seeking help when they need help? It's some of the resources that were available to me when I was working with juvenile probation department. There was we had resources for staff to reach out, in case we needed to speak with the clinician. So no, I'm looking forward to this AB 953, and I've been waiting for it to be implemented by San Mateo County. I know the city of San Mateo has been implementing that. So comes January 2022, where we're gonna have access to this data. It's something we need. We need to know what are the calls our deputies are answering to. Okay, so there's several things, accountability, transparency, and there's, as there's a lot of things happening in Half Moon Bay, but I think the worst things that happened in the community of Half Moon Bay is the death of Yanira Serrano, and Sandra Harmon to the hands of a deputy. Something that has put a shadow over members of the community. So we would like to address that. I personally, have been, trying to do my research, like I said, having personal conversations with deputies about how they feel, where they stand, and make it better for everybody. That is our purpose. We have the recommendations that we have here for you. It's something that we wanna, is from the city to the community. So we are not going to be able to answer every question. We're not going to be able to address every topic, but our goal, priority is to keep Half Moon Bay safe. Yes.
So to your points about the call-in line, I'm wondering if it might be more productive if these calls, went to a nonprofit. Like a government agency like ours running a hotline, it seemed to me a lot of folks would just be right out of the gate intimidated about, calling a city line, especially if certain information has to be divulged. So, maybe that, a local nonprofit might be better equipped, potentially with, city providing resources to operate, the line, or staff to check a line and share that information with the city. Better yet, as far as the sheriff's work is concerned, the county having such a hotline. I just think that maybe that having a resident of the city is making some people shy about filing complaints. So maybe we need to look at what's the best host for this hotline. What would people consider, more safe? I understand people want to know what people are complaining about, and I think we have to address that, but I think we first have to make people comfortable about reporting incidents. And maybe this is not the most productive way, to go. So I would lay that on everybody to think about. And I agree, things on our website are really hard to find. When I want to find something, when I go to our website, I struggle. I think we need a contract to update our website, but that's for another reason. I also think in terms of the other contract cities, again, city manager to city manager contact is probably not going to be terribly productive on this issue. I think it might be more productive for, council member to council member contact, exploring this option. And I'm happy to, engage that as I work on some of the county committees with some of the council members who I think and those contract cities would be interested in working together. And even if we only work with a subset, if it's 2 of the cities plus us, maybe we can generate, some heat and light that we might use to bring in the other cities. I do think working with other contract cities is an important piece of the puzzle. It's just like politics. Politicians count heads. Who's interested. So if more of the contract cities are interested in these issues, the better off we'll be in terms of making inroads here. So I would make that recommendation as well. And I would say to Joaquin's comments about the seed events of Yanira, Serrano, and others related is an important one. And I do think because of that, the mental health piece that staff is working on is super, super important. You want police to do the job that the institution was designed to do. Mental health isn't it. And I've seen before that I support making a separation there. And I think staff is doing great due diligence on that. And I'm very happy that we're going in that direction. I would say, generally speaking, that just from my perspective, working on complex issues for many years, that change takes time. So people need to be somewhat patient on the matter. I know it's difficult, but I also think we need that piece where we're demonstrating commitment by communicating what we're doing and demonstrating progress and having clear goals. At a minimum, you need that to build trust that you're working on important communities. So that's all I have to say for you.
Thank you. Yes, to comment on one of your comments about working with a nonprofit organization in the area to address any complaints. There's a number of organization in our area that has actually done reached out members of the community went to the nonprofit the nonprofit organization reached out to Captain Lopez. Captain Lopez personally, met, with 2 members of our community about an incident. Also, I know we had another member of the community, again, visit our local nonprofit, about a complaint. And so there's been 3 incidents, that nonprofit became involved because of the community members feeling comfortable enough, to go to that organization and ask questions and ask for help. It's something that has come up, when, like Matthew mentioned, one of the original, members of the Latino Advisory Council, when we presented Yanira Serrano presented program, about the complaint line. That it was talked about. Having the forms available online is not easy to navigate and print a form, and then submit it. So having a hard copy of the complaint available at our local nonprofits, we have Cause I Hope in Granada, I'm sure they will be happy to have forms available. Cause I Pride, here on Main Street, I'm sure they will be comfortable to have available, these copies. Alas in Half Moon Bay again, and then other organizations in the community to have these forms available, where you don't have to, search through the website, to maneuver, going into different pages to find a copy and print it, and then, bring it into the department. It's not an easy thing to do. So we will work on it to make it better. And again, the hotline, the number will be, we'll have better access to it by having this, these complaint forms available. It be also, something that we need to work on. I know we had to work with, working on, give an example on a restraining order. As simple as it is, we talk about, yes, do a restraining order. It's not that simple. It's a lot of work. Members of our community, Half Moon Bay, they have to go to Redwood City. First they have to find a copy online, print it, fill out the information, and bring it down to Redwood City. It's very difficult. I know there's people in Half Moon Bay that are having a hard time completing, these restraining orders. But it's building that relationship that we need to make it more accessible to our community. Not everybody is computer savvy. Not everybody has a computer at home with a printer to be able to print these forms. So we have to have them, get more accessible. And yes, going back, we do have to work with other, contracted, cities, it's not something that Half Moon Bay can do alone. It's not something that only Half Moon Bay needs. Other cities in San Mateo County need the same resources. I have conversations with different people from the county, from the different communities about the Jimenez Redback report, about how, that something like this could be implemented, in San Mateo County. Parts of it is, like I say, it's with the idea to make our community safer, to make it better, and I'm understanding, there's still the fear that we're gonna have less deputies, in our streets. No, it's not. We're gonna continue to have our deputies. Actually, I know the sheriff's department is always hiring. If you know anybody who's interested in being a sheriff, a sheriff deputy, attend to the academy. You need to be a high school graduate, have a good credit score, no felonies, and you can apply to be, to get in the academy. So it's very simple to go to the academy. They have good programs. So we want to work with our deputies, but we also want to make sure that our sheriff, Sheriff Bolanos, understands that we need, to have better trained deputies in our streets, to make sure to address the needs of our streets. And he has to understand that deputies are not trained, mental health, clinicians. He needs to understand that. Like I say, it's to make our communities safer.
And Mr. Chair, unless Councilmember Ruddick has another follow-up on that, I was going to respond just to make sure that we let you know that we hear your comments. And so I jotted down a bunch of notes. And so if you don't mind, I have like 6 or 7 kind of responses just to make sure you guys know that we're taking notes and we're being responsive. So on the first one, on Councilmember Ruddick's comment about the report, formalizing it, assigning timelines to the deliverables, absolutely. So we'll take this list of items and create a table with a timeline and milestones, and yeah, that's the kind of stuff we're good at. Completely agree, and so that sounds like a great next step, and we'll create something that's user friendly that we can show each time that holds us more accountable on moving towards some of these items on the list. With regard to the formality on these meetings, I think, probably is. I think it was suggested last time that they should be regular, but we didn't quite nail it down. We should nail it down. So if you guys prefer, this is the 3rd Wednesday of the month. I think it's good because it's between council meetings. So it allows this committee to be supportive of the upcoming council meeting if needed. So if 5 o'clock on the 3rd Wednesday, you tell us 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, at the end, you can tell us that. Third comment, Councilmember Jimenez made the comment about the categories of calls for service. And Councilmember Ruddick has also asked for this information as well. So again, we apologize that Sal's not here tonight to make his annual report. In rough numbers, there was around 13,000 calls for services last fiscal year. Half of those were officer initiated, approximately half were citizen initiated. And the question of what are the categories of all these calls? Which ones are mental health calls? Which ones, et cetera, et cetera. That is something we are working on. And it unfortunately is a little harder than I imagined. And I don't want to give you the bureaucratic answer that it's harder than you imagined, but we are working on it. And I'll just add on that we won't have that data and Sal is not going to be at the council meeting either. So this is a little bit of an extended leave for him. But we have invited Natasha. She's the county director of the Department of Public Safety Communications 911 dispatch. And the reality is this data really comes from them. Now, obviously they work cooperatively with the sheriff, but remember, we have a contract with the sheriff department and we have a second contract with 911 dispatch. And so that data is kept by them. And so Natasha has agreed to come. She was just hired and promoted as the new director. And Matthew and I have been taking the time to develop the relationship with her. She's great. And she is really committed to working with Half Moon Bay on some of these questions that we have. So we look at this first meeting for her to come to the meeting next Tuesday as an introduction. And so you can meet her and maybe she can say a few things and even ask these questions. But yeah, it's something we're working to tease out of them and get that data because it's critically important. So I didn't want to belabor that one, but both of you have asked that. It's a great question. We need that data. I don't know how we move forward on the mental health pilot program without that data. We have to have it. On the reporting, I'll say that we're not happy about it either. So the lack of information is something that was worked out with our city attorney and county council, and we're not pleased about that either. But I think Councilmember Ruddick made a very good point. That's something we can maybe work on later, but step one is to make sure people are comfortable using it. And I will say, and I don't know if I'm going to go too far here, but as Matthew said, we've only received 5 reports, and maybe that's because some of the reasons that you guys suggested, it's too hard to find, it's cumbersome, or there's people are scared to use it. But I will say that what we received is not really kind of the kind of things we were thinking we were going to get. We received a couple complaints that were traffic oriented. Another one that was maybe traffic related and was kind of a complaint about a deputy. It was, and that was passed on to the sheriff for them to take care of as they saw fit. That's a matter then, a matter for them to decide if a deputy acted wrongly or not. So that was passed on to them. One was what I would say was kind of what I took as a serious incident. Embedded in it was a complaint kind of about the service they received, but what was more concerning to me was the nature of what happened. Unfortunately, it was anonymous, and we were not able to track down any more information on that. So like I said, I probably already went too far on what I can tell you, but yeah, I think there's some work to be done in terms of actually getting people to use it first. So all your ideas are well noted. Also, the idea of the website. Let me just finish and I'll turn it over to you, Matthew. Website, make it easier. Matthew's obviously taking notes about that, and we hear your comments about this, but also just Councilmember Reddick, you generally made a comment about the website generally. So, and then finally, and then I'll give it to Matthew. Councilmember Reddick also, hey, maybe meeting with 2 cities is a good start. Sure. I think, yes, I'll work with Portola Valley and Woodside. If those are the 2 that are willing, I'll work to make that happen. And then I appreciate the comment you made that you would also work with your counterparts. Maybe it has to be done at your level instead of mine. Matthew, did I miss something?
No, I just wanted to supplement what you shared about the data that we're able to share from the hotline, and you made it clear, but I just want to reiterate, we're as frustrated as anyone else about the limitations on what we can share and we can't. But I do want to make sure it's clear, because some of the comments I heard, I think it was unclear. The sheriff isn't the problem here. This is California Penal Code that restricts access to that information. It's not, like a PRA, there's certain information we can withhold if we want to. The way that this penal code is written, it is very, very restrictive what we're legally allowed to share. And we didn't expect that as we rolled into this and worked with the Latino Advisory Council on getting this line rolling. But as the hiring agency of the sheriff, we're bound by the same restrictions that they are as an employer. What I will say is the comment about finding a different host, that might change that dynamic slightly. It will not help us get any better information about what happens after those incidents are reported to the sheriff, but it might allow a little additional information about the complaints to be shared with the community. And so I think that's something we will take back to the city attorney and have her do research from that perspective and see if that might change. If we fund that support, that could create a similar relationship. So there's some dynamics here we're going to have to talk about, but that might be an option that helps. And as has been pointed out, might also make people more comfortable with using these resources. In the meantime, we've gotten a lot of great feedback. I love the concept of, I think we assumed that if someone wasn't computer savvy, the phone number was enough, but I get it that some people just need that written form. And so I think that's an easy thing for us to roll out in the next couple of weeks, create a written document. My thought is that this informational flyer that we're working on at the request of some of our partners, maybe that's the front and the back side is the actual form. And we just get those into the hands of our community partners. We'll develop a protocol for those coming back to us so that we can still be responsive and meet the commitments we've made. The website, it's the first banner that pops up usually when you go to our website is the link to that form. I think, unfortunately, that is probably the easiest we're going to make navigating our website. So I think the key is really these cards that we've talked about, getting them into people's hands so that they can use a QR code, they can type in a direct link right to that form, or they can just make that phone call. And then you couple that with the hard copy forms, and maybe that does open this up a little bit further. That's the goal while we look at other structural opportunities for this line. But again, I just want to reiterate, there's nothing in our contract with the sheriff that will change our ability to share some of this information. It's in the California State Penal Code. They're bound by it, we're bound by it. You know, this is, you know, probably the result of many years of lobbying and representation of the employee groups and protecting their records, and that's where we're all constrained by. And then speaking, you know, Bob's committed us to the timeline. I think some of these are well suited to timelines for deliverables. Others I think are a little more ambiguous, but certainly maybe a timeline for reporting back and just giving progress updates can be a commitment. I will say the mental health response program, the community responder program, once we get that contractor on board and start working with them on a design, I think, you know, I've already got a timeline in my personal project management toolkit that I'm using. But when we get a contractor on board, that will be part of that contract, and we'll be able to really commit to some really good milestones and timelines. So point taken and understood why that will be helpful to the community and to you as a subcommittee.
I just wanted to throw out one more thought. And, you know, I know there's some, you know, pro bono legal services around immigration issues. You know, it might be good, maybe some of these nonprofits, maybe because I don't, has access to pro bono legal, but, you know, if they're receiving complaints and can check in with, you know, some low cost or pro bono legal services to ferret out issues surrounding, you know, complaints that might surface that look like they're material, you know, significant. You know, it might help to have that sort of intermediary between the nonprofit, you know, the city, you know, and the sheriff. So Joaquin, I don't know if you guys have access to like pro bono legal services, but, you know, it might be handy to, you know, look around the community for somebody who might be willing to consult from time to time on complaints that surface that, you know, seem to be really significant or have, you know, merit, you know, on the face, you know, with pursuing. Just a thought.
You know, along those lines, one of the pieces of feedback we received is to engage with the local ACLU chapter and work with them both on training the staff that might be responding to these calls, but also making available resources to individuals that have been affected in a way that, you know, rises to that need in their interactions with law enforcement. So those will all be included in the iterative changes we're making to this program.
Mr. Chair, if you'd like us to move to the next item, we'd be happy to do that.
Yes, please move to the next item.
So as I mentioned, we're tabling, I think it's item C, and so we can move to item D, and I can share my screen again. Thank you, Matthew. So the next item is a discussion about our sheriff's contract and the option that's coming up to extend it for 3 more years. So I quoted a few relevant quotes right out of the contract for the subcommittee's purpose, and I'll share those now and just get to where we're at. So section 4.2 in the contract, this agreement includes the option for the city and county to renew for 1 additional 3-year period to June 30th, 2025 by mutual agreement. We've all discussed that before. That's coming up June of next year. In order to exercise an option to renew, each party shall notify the other no later than September 30th of the year prior, that's this year, of the subject term and the desire for the sheriff's office to continue to provide law enforcement services for the city. So that date's coming up for us. Previously, it's been a letter from my predecessors. The previous city managers have sent that, and our research has indicated, maybe Councilmember Reddick, maybe you know or remember otherwise, has has been in the past, that letter has been sent by the city manager without any council action. But given the year we've had and the conversations we've had with the community, with the council, with this creation of this new subcommittee, we felt that we wanted to run this both by the subcommittee and then ultimately the city council next Tuesday. And I just wanted to make sure I had concurrence, is the word I'll use, direction to send that letter to the sheriff by September 30th. The next couple of sections I think are relevant are either party may terminate this agreement without cause by written notice sent 12 months prior to the termination. I think this is relevant because sometimes there is confusion, or I've heard questions asked about what a 3-year contract means. And it is a 3-year contract, but when either party can terminate without cause with 12 months notice, it does, you could argue it effectively makes it a 1-year contract because we have that ability to do that. We're not locked in, we can terminate with 1-year notice. So it makes it slightly over a 1-year contract if you want to look at it that way. Certainly the thinking was that, you know, there's a partnership here, a commitment. And so even though there's this clause, you know, having it started out as a 5-year and then successive 3-year options, I think that goes to the commitment of this is in, you know, for the long term, and there's reasons that we want to, you know, not make short-term decisions, either party, when it comes to it. So I just wanted to point that out. It's a 3-year option, but there's this clause that one could argue effectively makes it a 1-year contract. And then finally, I think this is important. The city may request any additional services not set forth in Exhibit A. Exhibit A is a list of all the services they provide in the field of public safety, law enforcement, or related fields within the legal power of the sheriff's office to provide, and the sheriff office will provide those at the rate set forth. So we have a rate sheet, which is Exhibit B. This is a pretty simple statement, a pretty broad statement. The thinking was, I think probably if we ever want to increase service level, if we wanted another deputy, if we wanted 10 deputies instead of 8 deputies, you know, that's, I think, probably what was contemplated here, and that it could be done by negotiation, but the rates are already established. And so it would be as simple as, you know, giving them the proper notice and then, you know, working the extra staff into the schedule at the rates we've already agreed upon. That's probably how it was thought about then. That said, this paragraph is certainly the paragraph for the kind of things that we're talking about. So in the recommendation 8, where it says we should negotiate possibly for some changes with regard to community policing, training, mental health services, this would be the applicable paragraph. This says that we can negotiate at any time. It's a contract. And we have the ability to say, hey, we want you consider this, and then, you know, there would be an agreement on what that extra service would cost. So for example, as the mental health pilot program is rolled out, it may be as Matthew said, we're designing it, we're making this up as we go. It may be that once we get it figured out, the sheriff says, you know, that's causing us to have some more clerical services needed for some reason. And so we're asking that we have 0.25 of a person added because this person is assisting to make sure those calls get routed the right. I'm just making up an example. And then we have the ability to amend the contract accordingly. So that was an example where we actually add to the contract and increase the cost. But we could, you know, if there's no cost items, the ability there is to negotiate. The sheriff himself said that he would do that, but under this provision that, you know, it has to work for them too, and it has to be under the legal power of their office. So I just wanted to share this. Don't have to go into too much detail, but it does get to the direction we received previously, which was that I should spend my time between now and June of next year looking to ways to take the direction we've heard from you and the community and try to negotiate some of these things into the option for next year. So I wanted to share those. My recommendation is that the subcommittee does agree that we should send the letter to exercise that 3-year option. And this is essentially what we'll be sharing with the full council on Tuesday. And any input you give us now, we'll share with them. But of course, you as the subcommittee can speak to the full council when we meet on Tuesday. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Vice Mayor Ruddock, you have any comments on this?
Yeah, I do, and I'm not prepared to pick a course of action tonight. You know, this meeting is from 5 to 7. You know, this decision, you know, benefits mostly by wide public participation and noticing that this decision is going to be made. So I don't feel comfortable with a subcommittee meeting making a recommendation to the full council. This deserves a very robust staff report for the next meeting, laying out all options, and there needs to be time for the council to have adequate discussion so that we can make, you know, a consensus recommendation. I don't purport to understand all the options here. The meeting was supposed to be at 7 o'clock. I'm not prepared to give you a specific recommendation on this, other than, you know, whatever goes to the council needs to be very robust, and we need to be prepared to allow lots of time for discussion.
Thank you for your comment. You know, I do agree with you. I'm not prepared either to make a recommendation. So it's about bringing this back to the council and for public, you know, to understand what is the new contract. So that will be the action that we'll be taking, Bob, taking it back to the council with a full-on presentation.
And I do see, I can respond, but I also see, Mr. Chair, that there is one member of the public that I think has raised their hand again specific to this topic. So if you want to take that public comment, you can.
Yes, please. Let's take the public comment.
Sure, thanks. Stacy, go ahead.
Well, the risk of being a voice that Vice Mayor Ruddock gets to hear again and again, I'll share in response to Bob's comment that sign the 3 years and potentially cancel in a year. I agree. I don't think that meets the nature of a partnership that we hope to continue to create with the Sheriff's Department. I would appreciate if we could at least have a discussion about the consideration of a 1-year extension, noting that there will be a new sheriff elected in June of 2022. And I think that's an important consideration. I think that we can be creative, that we're unable to be that now, in honoring both our Sheriff's Department and the good service that they give us, as well as any changes in service that we might like to see to increase the feeling of safety within our community. So I'd really like us to have a robust discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy, for your comment.
And Mr. Chair and Councilmember Ruddock, my response is so noted. Agree that that was the point, to take it to the full council. I just wanted the opportunity to hear from the Public Safety Subcommittee first. And I think it does go to previous comments about maybe the informality of this group. And I think maybe that's somewhat natural in that this was a new group. And so we're still figuring out how this subcommittee works and how it doesn't work and how it advises the council. And so I like the fact that it sounds like we're going to decide to have a regular cadence, so it's clear to the public just when the subcommittee meets, and start to understand, you know, what kind of actions they're actually are just informational versus which ones are vetted here first before they're then brought up to the full council. But based on the comments, you've heard it first. We'll have a robust staff report, and you've seen the 3 kind of important, relevant sections from the contract, and so we'll have that ready for the full council, and they'll get the same benefit as you, and the public will as well next Tuesday.
We do have one more speaker if you want to hear from them first.
Yes, please.
Maureen, go ahead.
Yes, I have a few disjointed comments based on previous discussion. And so let me just go forward. I think it would be very wise to marshal all of the nonprofit resources that are within the county and within Half Moon Bay. And I mean I don't just mean this person calls this person makes contact with this, but really as though you are writing a position paper on what is available and what they have before you start to refer to Star Vista. And I just briefly did some internet research to give you an idea. The 4 cities that are using Star Vista, Daly City has a population of 106,000, San Mateo 104,000, South San has a population of 67, and Redwood City has 85,000. So I look at a city like Half Moon Bay and I really think, how much money and budget do they really have? My second point is, Debbie, I do agree that numerous times it's really hard to find things on your city website, or for that matter, if you were just a citizen and you went on and tried to sign up for the agendas for these public safety meetings. I finally got Colleen is who finally got me on your mailing list. I do think a 988 national number could be a good idea. And then talking about finding documents, this is the second time I've seen the city put up a document called Exhibit A. And the first time it was put out at a council meeting. And so why don't you take the time to put the heading FY 21-22 Public Safety Work Plan, so that when people call up a document on the website, they will know what they're looking at. Finally, I hope you don't bog the sheriff with data collection and racial identity, because that's one great way to have non-functioning agency in a bureaucracy. And my last comment for Matthew is where you're suggesting ACLU. I have to smile when you said that, because I've never met an attorney who doesn't like an opportunity to sue. And that means you would be opening the doors for lawsuits to Half Moon Bay. Thank you again.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, Maureen. There are no other public speakers.
I would just ask staff in the staff report, for this item before the council, really be careful that you present all options and all pros and cons. It's an emotional issue. We want to make a decision based on the merits, rather than, high emotion. That wouldn't make good policy, but that's all I have to say.
Great direction. Appreciate that. Options and pros and cons.
If I might
We have
share,
nothing left on this item. Matthew, I see your hand raised, but you have nothing else.
just something really quick, just thinking about the cadence of this.
Oh yeah, I was
subcommittee
going to hit
meeting.
that, but go ahead.
And some of the things to think about, I think we've discussed with the survey, as that moves forward, we want to include this subcommittee in helping to review and craft the right questions and just make sure that that survey meets the goals that the full council has provided to us. So I think tying the next meeting to that is going to be really important. But then also reminding us, if we do move forward with this letter to the sheriff, renewing for 1 year or 3 years, whatever it might be, that opens the door for what I recall from 3 years ago, some pretty extensive negotiations. But even though it's a renewal of an existing contract, there's a lot of discussion and negotiation that goes on between now and the actual approval of that contract next June. And we'll probably just want to think about how this subcommittee can play a role in that process.
Yeah, so I don't purport to be an expert, culturally competent surveys. So I think what we want is for the public safety subcommittee to meet, and perhaps the consultant that's chosen meets with us, to discuss how questions are defined, and probably we need to even talk about what is the goal of the survey. We don't want to have defined goals before we even develop questions. So I would say, bring in the consultants to discuss. I don't know what you're writing up in your RFP, but you might even circulate that, about defining the goals for the survey. That's going to be really important in determining what sort of, poll we end up with. That's going to be the pipe through which everything travels.
Agreed. So that's really helpful. So your thought is you're basically saying go hire the consultant, and the next touch point for this committee would be after that consultant's hired, but before they really start doing their work. So I think that would probably point to a November meeting, 2 months from now, third Wednesday of November, and then I think if that sounds good, we can try to stay on a 2-month path. But I kind of acknowledge what Matthew also said. We may have to meet more frequently than that, but
well, you might even bring, the idea of the goals of the survey to the full council, just to assure we're on the right track. We don't want to collect information that we're not interested in getting. What is it in aid of? So.
Got it. Okay.
Bob, I'll just share that just with the cadence of meetings and council meetings and scheduling, that in this particular month, the third Wednesday put us between 2 council meetings.
It's not always
November, the third Wednesday puts us the day after a council meeting.
Yeah.
There probably isn't an issue there, but I just wanted to point that out.
Maybe it makes sense to be the second Wednesday generally. Okay. It might be the second Wednesday of November then. I think that's all we have. We'll turn it back over to you. Maybe we're there.
Okay, looking at to the next meeting, November 10th, Wednesday. Will we have any more reports for the maybe from the survey? Do we have anything to present to the community? Will anything be available?
On the survey?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, as just discussed, if we meet on November 10th, we would propose to actually have a firm hired by then, so that they could then be here at the November 10th meeting to discuss the methodology and the purpose as was just discussed. So all information that we would make available to the committee would be made public as well. Well, let me answer Councilmember Reddick's question on the RFP. So our thinking on that is actually kind of a less is more thought. So the first point is to get the best firm, and you don't need to tell them too much about what we want them to do and what we think they need to do to get the best firm. But then once we get them, then we have that conversation with them about that. So we don't want to dictate too much in the RFP to limit the creativity and the knowledge and the expertise of who we're hiring. And so it's more of an RFQ.
It's more of an RFQ,
Yes,
right?
It really is. It really is, to get the best firm. So if we have the authority to go do that and get the best firm, then I think we would be spending some time focusing on the details and bringing you and the community into that discussion with the consultant.
And I would say by November 10th, I expect we'll have at least identified and maybe even under some sort of a contract with our lead nonprofit for the community responder program. We could spend some time talking about some of the details of that at that meeting as well.
And I would just like to say to Maureen Fleming's point, about, we're not a large city. And why are we doing this? And it's true, we're not a large city. And certainly whatever we do, we want it to be scaled appropriately. But, it's really important, I think, to see this as a way to also build community capacity. Build the capacity of the community to take care of itself, to know itself and to take care of itself, and to be there if government's not there. You want to sort of distribute community power. You want all of our organizations to have the capacity to help the residents who live here and who visit here. So I see this, as part of the importance of it is capacity building, community capacity building our capacity to withstand, stresses, disasters, whatever it is. So that's one of the reasons why, I think it's a good investment.
Quick comment on that before we adjourn. I know for some of us, change is not easy. Having a new programs coming to our community, new ways of better serving our community. When we think, that we don't need it. When you don't need it, it's very different that other members in the community don't need the same program. So it's to address that. We all have different needs. But we have to talk about equity. Equity, as I understand it, is giving the opportunity to everybody to become successful, to be healthy, to be safe. So that's what we're trying to do. If you don't need it, good for you. I'm glad you don't need it. But when we have members in our community that need programs like the ones we're trying to offer, that changes in our community, we need to find them. So with that, it is my priority, the serious priority, my goal, to provide a safe and healthy community and environment for everybody. So thank you. Have any more questions? No. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like your concluding remarks.
Me too.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.